Hey everyone, thanks for coming back for People and Places of the Bible. This week we're going to talk about Joseph, a story I'm sure many of you have already heard. Isaac grew up to be a man and got married. That's what we saw last week. He and his wife had 2 sons. Do you remember their names? That's right, Jacob and Esau. Then Jacob got married and he had 12 sons. 12 sons. That's a lot. The 11th son was named Joseph, and Jacob loved him very much. He even made Joseph a special coat that was fancier than anything his brothers had. Joseph's brothers saw the coat and knew just how much their father loved him, so they were mad and jealous of Joseph. Then, one night, Joseph had a dream that made his brothers even angrier. He dreamed that he and his brothers each had a piece of wheat, but their pieces of wheat were bowing down to his. His brothers thought this was ridiculous. Joseph was almost the youngest brother, so they would never bow down to him. Who did he think he was? Joseph would never be their leader. Well, guess what? That wasn't Joseph's only dream. On another night, he dreamed that the sun and the moon and 11 stars, just like his 11 brothers, were bowing down to him. This time, he didn't just tell the dream to his brothers, he told it to his father too. Even Jacob was angry with Joseph, and his brothers were absolutely furious. Then one day, Joseph's brothers were away, taking care of their dad's sheep. His dad told Joseph to go check on his brothers and the sheep, so Joseph put on his special coat and set out to find his brothers. The brothers were working in the field and saw Joseph coming. One of them had the idea first, but quickly they were all talking about what they could do to teach Joseph a lesson about acting like he was more important than them. Their hearts were hard with jealousy and anger, and they didn't even care about that they were disobeying God. All but one brother wanted to kill Joseph, but one brother, Reuben, said they should instead throw him into a deep, deep hole. So that's exactly what they did. When Joseph arrived, the brothers took his coat and threw him in the hole. Then they sat down to have lunch like it was no big deal. While they were eating, along came some traveling businessmen who bought and sold things, even people. The brothers knew what they could do. They could get rid of Joseph and get some money. Their hearts were still hard and angry. They were so jealous and so mean. So they sold their brother as a slave just so that they could get some pieces of silver. And then they tore Joseph's coat, put animal blood on it, and sent it to their father Jacob. Their father got the coat and knew this could only mean one thing: Joseph must be dead. Jacob was devastated. He tore his clothes and wept huge tears for the son he believed he would never see again. But Joseph wasn't dead at all. In fact, he was arriving in Egypt, a land where a king would one day need help from someone exactly like Joseph. You see, God promises that he chooses the people who will become leaders, and he had chosen Joseph. The brothers thought they were getting rid of him, but we're going to see how they were part of making Joseph's dreams turn into promises. In the faraway land of Egypt, Joseph was now being held prisoner by the king. But Joseph wasn't alone. God was with him. He was one of God's people, and God had given him a very special gift, the gift of understanding dreams and how they told what God was going to do. Now, this didn't happen for all dreams, but Joseph's special gift was because he had a soft heart, one that was well connected to God's heart. This was long before there was a Bible, but Joseph could still hear God so clearly and know what God was saying. So not long after Joseph's brothers sold him, and he ended up in the Egyptian prison, 2 of the king's helpers told Joseph their dreams. The men were very confused, but Joseph explained what the dreams meant. He said they were telling what God was going to do in the future, and soon everything Joseph described was exactly what happened. So the men knew that Joseph was a man who could hear from God. 2 really long, not fun, no good years later, Joseph was still trapped in prison, but he still loved and believed God, and his heart was still soft. Joseph knew God hadn't forgotten him because he remembered the dreams God had given him, dreams that one day Joseph would be a leader that others looked up to. His brothers might not have liked those dreams, but Joseph knew that they were true. One day the king had 2 dreams. He knew they were important, but he didn't understand them, so he asked everyone for help. One of his men remembered the time Joseph had understood his earlier dream, so the man told the king about Joseph. The king, who was called Pharaoh, called for Joseph and told him all about his dreams. In the first dream, 7 cows came out of the river. These cows were big and would make lots of meat for the people to eat. But then 7 thin, small cows appeared. These small, sick-looking cows didn't have any meat on them, but they ate the big, healthy cows. Right after that, Pharaoh had another dream. In this dream, 7 really big pieces of wheat came up on a stalk. And then, after them, 7 tiny, thin, dying pieces of wheat sprouted up and swallowed the 7 big ones. After the second dream, Pharaoh had become very worried and called for help. So Joseph heard the king tell about his dreams, because God had given Joseph that special gift. Joseph knew exactly what these dreams meant. He told Pharaoh the dreams meant there would be 7 years with lots of food to grow and eat, but then there would also be 7 more years when animals would die and food would not grow from the ground. He told Pharaoh that God gave this dream so that the king would be able to protect his people from starving. Joseph told Pharaoh a plan from God for how to save enough food so that when the 7 years of no food growing came, all of the people would still have enough to eat. Pharaoh knew immediately that Joseph was hearing from God. The king was so thankful for Joseph's help that he put him in charge of the plan to save the food. And just like that, Joseph became a powerful leader in the king's house. He wasn't a prisoner anymore. He had been protected by God and made into a leader just like God had told him, even though he had been trapped and left all alone. Joseph went from being a prisoner to being one of Pharaoh's top leaders. Pharaoh had beautiful clothes made for Joseph and gave him his own chariot. In it, Joseph traveled around Egypt, making sure everyone grew and saved enough food before the 7 years when the ground would not grow food at all. Joseph's life had changed so much from the boy whose jealous brothers had thrown him in a pit and pretended he was dead. Joseph now had power, but he remembered it was God who had protected him. God had given him the gift of understanding dreams, and God deserved all of the worship and praise. God had given Joseph everything he needed. A grown-up way to say that God gave Joseph what he needed is to say the word provided. For 7 years, the land made much food, but suddenly it stopped. Just as Joseph had said, the land would no longer grow food, and the animals all died. Everything was fine in Egypt because God had warned Pharaoh through Joseph, so they were prepared. Joseph had made sure there was food stored away for all the people in Egypt. In fact, he had made sure there was even a little extra stored away for people from other surrounding lands, because he knew that they too would be hungry. Pharaoh wanted to make sure that the Egyptian people got their food first, and that all other food was given out fairly. So he put Joseph in charge of making sure that only those who were approved by Joseph received any of the stored food. Pharaoh knew that they had to make it last 7 whole years, or else they would starve. Meanwhile, Joseph's father, Jacob, and the 11 brothers still lived far away. They had not known for a long time would be coming without food, so they were running out of food and starving. Joseph's father heard that there was food for sale in Egypt, so he gathered his sons and told them to go to Egypt and buy some grain. Their father was still so sad thinking that Joseph was dead, so he kept one son, Benjamin, safe at home. Jacob had never forgotten Joseph and loved him so much. Joseph's brothers arrived in Egypt and were brought in before Joseph to ask to buy grain. Joseph recognized his brothers immediately, but they didn't know who he was. He had fancy Egyptian clothing on. They bowed down low before him, and Joseph remembered his dreams of them bowing down before him. He saw that his father was not there and that one of his brothers was also missing. So he wanted to test his brothers. When they asked to buy grain, Joseph told them they were spies. They tried to tell him they were not spies, that they had money and that they had to return with grain to their father and younger brother back home, or else they would all starve. Joseph put them in prison for 3 days while he decided what to do. While in prison, Reuben reminded his brothers about how they had sold Joseph. He told his brothers that they were starving and in prison because of that. Reuben said all of this in front of Joseph because he didn't know that Joseph could speak their language or understand them. But he did. He heard and he understood. When Joseph heard Reuben speak with sadness over how they treated him, he had to turn away from them because he had begun to cry. Even though he had trusted God when his brothers had been so mean to him long ago, it still hurt him very much. And meanwhile, as promised, God had done exactly what he said he would do. He had brought 7 good years, and now the 7 hard years, and he had brought Joseph's brothers to bow down before him. And now those brothers had to wait. Soon it was time. Joseph faced his 10 brothers and told them he would let them go back home. He would send them with the grain that they could buy, but they had to bring back Benjamin. To make sure they came back, Joseph was going to hold one brother, Simeon, in prison. The brothers didn't know it, but Joseph had all their money placed in their bags with the grain. The brothers set out toward their homeland. At their first stop, one of them opened his bag and saw his money inside. They were so confused and wondered out loud what God was doing. When they got home and opened the other sacks, they found money in each of them. The brothers weren't sure if they were being tricked in some way or even punished for what they had done to Joseph. Not just selling him into slavery, but also letting their father think he was dead. Their hearts were still so hard, but they feared God. They knew he was in control, and they knew that they all deserved punishment. The brothers told their father all that had happened. They explained that Pharaoh's man had imprisoned Simeon and demanded they bring Benjamin back to Egypt. Joseph's father was not about to let them have Benjamin. He had already lost Joseph, and now Simeon. He feared he would lose Benjamin too. But when the grain ran out, Joseph's father gave up and told the brothers they could take Benjamin. But the father said they should also take the gift of honey and nuts back to Pharaoh's leader, along with the double the money. They could tell the leader how the last money had ended up in their sacks. The father pleaded with them to get Simeon back and return with Benjamin too. The brothers did as their fathers asked, and soon were standing in front of Joseph once again. He saw Benjamin and knew they had been telling the truth. He had a meal prepared for them to eat together, and he began to ask about their father. When they said he was alive, Joseph was overwhelmed with happiness. He looked at Benjamin. Joseph was back together with all of his brothers, yet he still wasn't sure if they could be trusted, so he decided they needed just one more test. Joseph told his men to place a silver cup in Benjamin's bag. Then the next day he gathered the brothers and sent them back home, along with Simeon. But soon Joseph asked his servant to go after the brothers and stop them. The servant said, "Someone has stolen my master's silver, and whoever it is will have to become a servant in the house of Pharaoh forever." The brothers promised they had not stolen anything, but when the cup was found in Benjamin's bag, they were all brought back before Joseph. Judah immediately began to plead with Joseph not to take Benjamin. He told Joseph how his father had already lost one son and that his father would die if he lost Benjamin. He told Joseph that if someone must be taken as a servant, to please take Judah and let Benjamin go home to their father. Joseph couldn't hide his feelings anymore. He told all his servants to leave so that only he and his brothers remained. Once they were alone, he immediately began to weep and cried out, "I am Joseph. Is my father Jacob truly still alive?" His brothers were at first afraid because they knew what they had done to Joseph, but Joseph told them not to be afraid or upset. He believed God had sent them to Egypt to save all their lives by being able to store the grain for the land. He said that it wasn't really his brothers who had sent him to Egypt, but God who sent them there. He explained that God was in control of it all, and he had a great plan. Joseph sent the brothers back home with all sorts of food and told them to bring back their father. Joseph explained that he was now a man of great power and would be able to give them land in Egypt and take care of them like never before. His brothers did as he commanded, and when their father saw all that Joseph had sent, wagons of food and supplies, and when he realized that his long-lost son was alive, the father's heart softened, and he worshipped God with thankfulness like he had not in years. No one could have ever imagined how Joseph's life was going to turn out when his brothers sold him, but God always knew, and God was always in charge. This is a super important thing for you to know about God. He is sovereign, which means he is in charge of every single thing that happens. He isn't just in charge of what happened to Joseph, but he's in charge of what happens in your life too. He already knows every single adventure he has planned for your entire life. God always keeps his promises. This week in your bag, you'll find a pack of Fruit Loops. This is to remind you of Joseph and the coat of many colors. In your bag this week, you will find for your snack a pack of Fruit Loops. This is to remind you of the promises of God and Joseph's coat of many colors. You will also find a cutout just like this in your bag. You'll need to cut it out, and then I encourage you to fold inwards the two sides and color it like Joseph's coat of many colors. And on the inside, you will write, "God always keeps his promises." Don't forget to answer this week's questions on Joseph. and I will see you soon. Thanks.